When my father died, I expected grief. I braced myself for long nights, quiet mornings, and that empty ache where love used to live. But I didn't expect betrayal, especially not from my own family. People say death brings families closer, but for mine, it cracked open a truth I hadn't been ready to face. That morning, I stood outside my childhood home. The wind cut through my coat, but my palms were sweating. Something felt wrong, off, but I couldn't quite say what. Laughter spilled through the windows, warm and carefree. My siblings were inside. I wasn't invited. My name is Emily, I'm 33, and until that moment, I thought I had at least a place in the family. I was never the golden child. That was Rachel, my older sister. She had this aura that made everyone orbit her. Then there was Daniel, my younger brother, the agreeable one, quiet and loyal. Me? I was the one who left. The one who didn't fit. But my dad. He was different. With him, I didn't have to explain myself. I could just be. When he got sick, I came back. I left my job, my apartment, my life in the city, and moved home to take care of him. I don't regret it. Not even a second. Those last few months with him were slow, painful, and somehow beautiful. Some mornings, he couldn't talk. Other days, he talked for hours, about his childhood, meeting Mom, being terrified when Rachel was born. He always smiled when he talked about me. There was one night I'll never forget. We were on the back porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. He turned to me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily," he said, "there's something I need you to keep safe. Promise me, okay?" He handed me a sealed envelope. It was heavy, like it held more than just paper. I asked what it was, but he only smiled. "When the time comes, give it to Mr. Halbert. Mr. Halbert, our lawyer." I tucked the envelope away in my nightstand. I never opened it. I didn't want to. I wasn't ready to think about losing him. Then one night, he was just gone. No dramatic ending. Just silence. I held his hand long after the nurse confirmed it, numb and empty. I thought the worst part of losing my dad would be the silence he left behind. But it wasn't. It was the noise I heard days later, Rachel's voice, laughing through the window. "She doesn't deserve a dime," she said. "We finally got everything." My throat closed. My hands shook. My heart didn't break, it collapsed. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was angry. I reached into my pocket and felt the edge of the envelope. Whatever was inside. It was going to change everything. I stepped into the house. The scent was the same, old wood, coffee, lavender potpourri. But it didn't feel like home. It felt colder, sharper, like I didn't belong. Rachel and Daniel were lounging on the couches, wine glasses in hand. Laughing. Celebrating. Rachel's words echoed in my mind, "She doesn't deserve a dime." She hadn't hugged me at the funeral. Barely looked at me. I'd thought it was grief. Now, I knew better. She wasn't mourning. She was gloating. I slipped out without a word. Drove aimlessly. Trying to breathe. Why hadn't I been invited to the will reading? Why was I being erased from a family I had sacrificed so much for? But deep down, I knew. I had always been the outsider. Rachel was the star, perfect grades, debate team, Mom's pride. Daniel was the peacemaker, quiet, compliant, invisible. And me? I liked books more than people. Asked too many questions. Rachel hated how close I was to Dad. I saw it in her eyes every time he chose me to help with the car, or run errands. She'd smile, but her jaw would twitch. "It's cute," she once said, "how you're content with simple things." There was always a sting in her compliments. When Dad got sick, she was too busy. Daniel showed up once in a while, but always left quickly. I was the one who stayed. I fed him. Sat beside him when the pain kept him awake. Held his hand when he could no longer speak. And now, I was the one with the envelope. That night, when the anger hardened into purpose, I finally opened it. My breath caught when I saw the words, "Last Will and Testament of William J. Clark." The date, 3 weeks before he passed. It was new. Different from the one Rachel and Daniel had seen. My heart pounded as I scanned his signature, real, unmistakable. This wasn't a note scribbled on his deathbed. It was official. Stamped. Witnessed. Notarized. And he had given it to me. Alone in my childhood room, I read every word. Over and over. My hands trembled. My mind raced. He had known. He had known what Rachel would do. What Daniel wouldn't. He had trusted me. And now, I held the truth. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Halbert's office. He blinked in surprise when he saw me. But the moment I handed him the envelope, his expression changed. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the pages, then looked up. This is dated after the one I read with your siblings. My heart thudded. This changes a lot, he said softly. I told him everything, how Dad had given it to me, how I hadn't known what it was. He nodded slowly, the pieces finally fitting together in his mind. Emily, he said, voice calm but firm. This is the valid will. And just like that, the guilt I had been carrying slipped away. I wasn't excluded. I wasn't forgotten. I had been chosen. They tried to shut me out. But Dad made sure I had what I needed. Now, I had more than a secret. I had the truth. Rachel stood frozen, her mouth slightly ajar as the lawyer's words echoed in the living room. This will supersede the one we reviewed last week. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the room felt like glass, fragile, tight, seconds from shattering. Daniel looked at me, and I could tell he was doing the math in his head. He wasn't like Rachel. He didn't operate from entitlement, he operated from fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of conflict, fear of making waves. Rachel, however, recovered first. This is ridiculous, she barked, her voice climbing with every syllable. You mean to tell me Dad changed his will and didn't say a word? To any of us? She turned to Mr. Halbert, her hand slicing the air as if she could cut down reality with her indignation. You're seriously going to take her word for this? Mr. Halbert didn't flinch. Rachel, I'm not taking her word. I'm taking your father's word. His signature, his notary seal, 2 witnesses, all legally verified. It's not up for debate. You think this is real? She whispered, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. He wouldn't do this to us. Not to me. I could see her unraveling. It was the first time I had ever truly seen her unsure. Not the poised, perfect daughter, not the ever-smirking victor. This Rachel looked like a child who had just realized the world wasn't bending to her anymore. I'm not here to argue, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I didn't ask for this. I just honored what Dad asked me to do. Daniel stood, rubbing the back of his neck. So, what does this mean, exactly? Mr. Halbert cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. It means the terms of the previous will are void. This updated version is now legally binding. He flipped through the pages, stopping to read aloud. To my daughter Emily, who stood by me when I couldn't stand for myself, I leave the family home, the majority share in Clark Hardware, and my personal savings. My breath caught. I hadn't even read that part properly. I had skimmed it, assuming it was just a revision. But now, hearing it spoken aloud, I felt the full weight of it crash down on me. Rachel's face turned an alarming shade of red. The house? He left her the house? Daniel looked more confused than angry. And the business too? Mr. Halbert nodded. He made specific instructions. Rachel and Daniel are still mentioned, he left you both trust funds. But Emily is now the primary beneficiary. Rachel stormed out of the room, muttering something under her breath. The front door slammed a moment later, rattling the window panes. Daniel sat back down slowly, his eyes still flicking from the will to me, to the door, and back again. I didn't know, he said softly. I mean, I didn't think he would. I didn't either, I admitted, sinking into the old armchair across from him. We sat in silence for a minute. The kind that didn't need to be filled. The kind that holds all the things you want to say but can't. I'm sorry, he said, finally. I blinked, surprised. For what? For not being there more. For letting Rachel steer everything. I wanted to be angry at him, but I couldn't. Not like with Rachel. Daniel was complicit, sure, but not cruel. Dad loved you, I said. He just knew you'd survive. He wasn't sure I would. He gave a small nod, and for once, he didn't try to fix it. The next few days were a whirlwind of paperwork, legal filings, and tense silences. Rachel refused to speak to me. She had her lawyer send angry emails to Mr. Halbert, but it was clear she had no case. The will was airtight. Word got out quickly. Relatives started calling, not to congratulate me, but to fish for drama. Aunt Sharon asked, so what did you do to convince him? I hung up on her. The house felt different now. Not just because I technically owned it, but because it no longer belonged to a version of the past I couldn't return to. Every room was a memory, and every memory was now tainted by the war over what was left behind. One evening, I walked into Dad's old study. His desk was still cluttered, papers, receipts, a mug with the words "Number 1 Dad" faded from years of washing. I sank into his leather chair and pulled open the top drawer. There, next to a rusted key and an old photo of the three of us kids, was a note in his handwriting. I unfolded it slowly. If you're reading this, I guess I'm gone. I hope I did the right thing. I know this might make things harder for you, but I had to make sure you were seen. You always saw me. Thank you for that. Love, Dad. Tears blurred the words as I folded the note back up and held it to my chest. I had spent so long trying to find a place in a family that seemed determined to keep me on the edge. But now, for the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider. I felt chosen. Later that week, Daniel came by. He brought coffee and an awkward half smile. I think you should run the hardware store, he said. I plan to. He nodded. Just don't turn into Rachel, okay? I laughed. Promise. As he left, I stood on the porch, the same porch where I'd stood weeks earlier, frozen and forgotten. Only now, I wasn't on the outside looking in. I was home. The first night alone in the house felt like sleeping inside a photograph. Everything was still. Too still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. I lay in the bedroom I grew up in, the familiar creak of the ceiling fan above me offering the only comfort. The furniture was the same. Dad never threw anything out, but it all felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone I used to be. In the morning, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, making coffee from the old machine that wheezed like it had smoked a pack a day. I opened the cabinet and saw the same mismatched mugs we'd used since I was a teenager. I reached for Dad's favorite, the one with a chipped lip and a faded goat tiger's print. I sat at the breakfast table, watching the sun pour in through the window, dust dancing in the air like little golden ghosts. The house was mine now. But it felt like I had inherited not just the building, but the weight of a lifetime too. A knock at the door broke my thoughts. When I opened it, I wasn't expecting to see her. Rachel. She wore oversized sunglasses and clutched her designer purse like a shield. Her lips were tight, eyes red-rimmed. I'm not here to fight, she said quickly, before I could speak. I stepped aside without a word, and she walked in like she still owned the place. Old habits. We sat in the living room, me on the armchair, her on the couch, legs crossed, arms folded. A familiar battle stance. I read the will again, she said, voice low. Had another lawyer look at it. It's solid. I nodded. I know. I don't get it, though, she continued. Why you? You were gone for years. You barely came around. And suddenly, you're Dad's favorite? I took a breath. Rachel, I didn't ask for any of this. I came because he asked me to. I took care of him when no one else did. When you were too busy, and Daniel was off playing golf with his buddies. I changed his bandages. I listened to him cry. I was here. Her face twisted, but she didn't speak. He wasn't perfect, I said, softer now. We both know that. But he tried at the end. He wanted to make things right. Rachel looked away, out the window. You think I didn't care? That I wasn't hurting too? I didn't respond. There was too much history between us, years of being pitted against each other, of being compared, measured, dismissed. I was angry at him, she admitted after a pause. I felt like he never saw me unless I was succeeding. Unless I was the best. I blinked. He did that to all of us. She turned to me then, and for the first time in a long while, she looked like my sister again. Not the competitor, not the enemy. Just a woman exhausted from holding herself together. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I don't want us to be enemies anymore. I nodded slowly. Me neither. We sat in silence for a while. When she stood to leave, she looked back and said, You should fix the porch light. It's flickering. It was such a Rachel thing to say that I laughed. And to my surprise, so did she. Over the next few weeks, I began to rebuild, not just the house, but myself. I spent mornings at Clark Hardware, learning the ropes from the employees who had worked there longer than I'd been alive. Mr. Price, the gruff manager with a heart of gold, taught me how to balance inventory sheets and deal with vendors. You've got your father's eyes, he told me once. But not his temper, thank God. Afternoons were spent at home, cleaning out rooms filled with old junk and older memories. I found photo albums, letters, even old toys from when we were kids. I kept what mattered. The rest, I donated. One day, while clearing out the attic, I found a dusty box labeled for Emily. Inside was a small wooden jewelry box, a faded Polaroid of me and Dad at my high school graduation, and a tiny silver locket I hadn't seen in years. I opened the locket. Inside was a photo of me as a baby, and on the other side, Dad's handwriting, "My sunshine." I sat on the attic floor and cried. Not because I was sad, but because, for the first time, I felt like I had been seen. Truly seen. Daniel visited occasionally, helping me with the store's transition. He never asked for a share, never hinted at resentment. One afternoon, after we restocked a shelf of paint cans, he looked at me and said, "You know, I always thought Rachel was the strong one. But it's you." I smiled. "Thanks, Danny." He looked down at his shoes. Dad would be proud. Maybe he would be. Maybe, in his own flawed way, he always was. A month later, I hosted a small dinner at the house. Nothing fancy, just pizza, some wine, and music from Dad's old record player. Rachel showed up with a bottle of Chardonnay and a peace-offering cheesecake. Daniel brought board games. We laughed. We argued about who cheated at Scrabble. We argued louder about who won Monopoly. It wasn't perfect. But it was a start. After everyone left, I stood alone in the doorway, looking out at the dark yard. The porch light, now fixed, glowed warm above me. The house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt alive. It felt like mine. Spring arrived slowly, painting the yard in soft greens and pinks. The dogwood tree in the front began to bloom again, just like it did every year when we were kids. I used to sit under it during the long, humid summers, reading or pretending I was somewhere far away. Now, I sat there again, but not to escape. This time, I was present. Rooted. The town had started to notice me. People would nod as I walked down Main Street. Old neighbors dropped by the hardware store with friendly smiles and dusty memories. "Didn't think we'd see another Bennett run the shop," one woman said as I helped load mulch into her truck. "Your father would have liked this." I wasn't sure if she meant the business or the way I folded the tarp over the bags just like he used to. Either way, I smiled and thanked her. On Saturdays, I opened the store early. I liked the quiet before the rush, just me, the hum of the fluorescent lights, and the scent of cedar and old nails. But one Saturday was different. Rachel showed up again, this time holding a paper bag and wearing jeans instead of her usual sharp heels. "Thought I'd bring breakfast," she said, holding up the bag. "Donuts." "Don't get used to it." I grinned. "What's the catch?" "No catch. I just wanted to talk." We sat behind the counter on 2 paint buckets, biting into chocolate-glazed pastries and sipping from coffee cups that had long lost their logos. "I've been thinking about selling Mom's condo," Rachel said after a moment. "It's too big, and too full of memories I'm not ready to face." "You don't have to do it all at once," I said gently. She nodded. "That's what my therapist says too." I raised an eyebrow. "Rachel? Therapy?" She laughed. Yeah. Big surprise. Turns out trying to control everything doesn't fix grief." We both chuckled, the kind of laugh that lives somewhere between pain and release. She grew quiet. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if things were different? If Dad had been better to us sooner?" "All the time," I admitted. "But I also think maybe we turned out stronger because of it." Rachel looked at me, something warm in her expression. "You're not the girl who left anymore, Em. You're something else." That hit me harder than I expected. After she left, I stayed in the store a while longer, staring at the rows of tools and paint cans and garden hoses. Somehow, it all meant more now. Later that week, I got a call from Mr. Walters, the high school principal. "We're renovating the old library," he said. "Would you be willing to donate supplies or help with the planning?" I surprised myself by saying yes without hesitation. Being involved felt right. And the idea of giving back to the place that raised me, it grounded something deep inside. The day I walked into the school again, it felt surreal. The hallways were narrower than I remembered, the lockers shorter, the air somehow exactly the same. I passed the old art room and peeked in. The new teacher, a kind-eyed woman named Ms. Lang, was helping a group of students create a mural. When she saw me, she smiled. "You must be Emily Bennett. Heard you were back." "Guilty," I said with a laugh. "Want to help?" Without thinking, I picked up a brush. We painted clouds and rolling hills. One student asked if we could include the dogwood tree from the town square. "It's like the symbol of home," she said. That stuck with me. Home wasn't just walls and wood. It was roots. Symbols. Memories passed on. On the anniversary of Dad's death, I invited Rachel and Daniel to the house. We didn't dress up. No fancy speeches. Just grilled burgers in the backyard and shared stories. Daniel told a story about Dad fixing his broken bike with duct tape and a screwdriver, and it actually worked for 2 months. Rachel rolled her eyes but laughed. Classic Dad. Patch it up and pretend it's new. We laughed until we cried. Then we cried without laughing. When the sun began to dip, I pulled out the locket I'd found in the attic. I handed it to Rachel. I think you should have this. She opened it slowly, eyes wide. You found this? She whispered. In a box labeled for Emily. But I think he meant it for us both. She clutched it to her chest and didn't speak for a long time. Daniel watched us quietly. Then he stood up and walked to the shed. When he returned, he held an old, rusted hammer. This was Dad's favorite, he said. Kept it even after he got new ones. Said the weight was perfect. I took it from him, the handle smooth from years of use. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I started drawing plans. Not just to fix the old fence or repaint the shutters. I had bigger ideas. A community space in the backyard, picnic tables, a tool-lending library, maybe even a weekend craft fair. Dad had built this house for himself. But I wanted to rebuild it for everyone. I reached out to neighbors, local businesses, even the high school art club. Everyone wanted in. This place matters, they kept saying. It always did. I could feel it too. The wind through the trees. The way kids ran past the picket fence. The way Rachel dropped by without calling now. Something was shifting. Something was healing. One evening, I stood outside and watched the dogwood petals fall like confetti. The air was warm. The porch light glowed soft behind me. A little girl from next door waved as she rode past on her bike. Hi, Miss Emily. I waved back, heart swelling. Miss Emily. Not the runaway. Not the failure. Not just the daughter of a man who never quite knew how to love properly. But Emily. The woman who came home, and stayed. The first community gathering in my backyard took place on a soft Sunday afternoon. The dogwood tree was in full bloom, the tablecloths were checkered red and white, and laughter filled the space like music. Kids chased each other between folding chairs, old friends swapped stories under string lights, and Rachel stood by the grill, flipping veggie burgers like she'd done it her whole life. I moved from group to group with a tray of lemonade, soaking it all in. This was the life I never imagined having, and somehow, it was better than anything I once dreamed from far away. Emily, Miss Lang, the art teacher, called out as she approached with a plate of cookies. You created something really special here. I smiled, brushing my hands on my jeans. I didn't do it alone. She looked around and nodded. No, but you started it. That matters. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe it. That maybe, despite everything, despite the years lost, the silence, the broken pieces, I had started something new. Later in the evening, when the sun had dipped low and fireflies began blinking like stars scattered across the yard, Daniel stood up on one of the picnic tables and cleared his throat. Okay, he said, waving his arms. I'm not great at speeches, but I want to say something before we all roll into a sugar coma. Everyone turned toward him, quieting. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say this town's been missing something for a long time. We've lost people. We've lost places. But every now and then, someone reminds us who we are. He looked straight at me. Emily, you did that. You brought the soul back to this street. I blinked quickly, my throat tightening. A small chorus of applause followed, and I mouthed a silent thank you, not trusting myself to speak. Rachel stepped forward, holding a gift-wrapped box. Oh no, I said, laughing nervously. What's this? Something from the three of us, she replied, motioning to Daniel and herself. I opened the box carefully, peeling back the tissue paper until I found a framed photograph. It was our childhood home, this house, but digitally restored in the image. The paint was fresh, the windows glowing with warm light. But that wasn't what caught me. On the porch stood the four of us. Me, Rachel, Daniel, and Dad. Photoshop had filled in what real life hadn't. We were smiling. Together. I know it's not real, Rachel said softly. But I wanted us to have one picture where we were whole. I clutched the frame to my chest and nodded. It's perfect, I whispered. In the days that followed, something settled in me. Not resignation, but peace. I went through the attic again, this time not to search, but but to let go. I made piles: donate, keep, recycle. But one box stopped me. It was tucked deep in the corner, labeled in Dad's scratchy handwriting, "For the future." Inside, I found blueprints. Sketches for an extension to the house, a workshop, maybe, or an art studio. Notes in the margins read things like, "Big window here for morning light, and shelves low enough for kids." He must have drawn them after we left. Maybe it was his way of imagining a different ending. I ran my fingers across the lines, then folded the papers carefully. Maybe the future he imagined wasn't possible for him. But I could still build something from it. By summer, the backyard had transformed again. Where there was once overgrown grass, now stood a small wooden structure, half greenhouse, half studio. We named it the Nest. It became a place for the community to gather. Kids painted, seniors planted herbs, Rachel even hosted yoga classes on the patio. One afternoon, as I watered the seedlings by the window, a little girl named Molly tugged at my shirt. "Miss Emily, were you always this happy?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I knelt beside her. "No," I said truthfully. "But I learned to be." She nodded like she understood, then skipped away. That evening, I stood under the dogwood tree once more. The petals had begun to fall again, dotting the grass like snow. Rachel joined me, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Want to hear something wild?" she said, handing me a mug. "I applied for a job here. At the school. Guidance counselor." My eyebrows shot up. "Seriously?" "Seriously. I want to help kids like us. The ones who don't know how to ask for what they need." I touched her arm. "They'd be lucky to have you." We sipped our tea in silence for a while. Then she said, "You know what I realized, Em?" "What's that?" "Coming home didn't break us. Staying did." And she was right. Staying meant facing the memories, the ghosts, the grief, but also the healing, the hope, and the chance to rewrite the ending. A few weeks later, I stood by the newly painted mailbox, watching as the sun dipped behind the horizon. The house glowed behind me. Laughter echoed from the backyard. A dog barked. Someone strummed a guitar. And I knew, finally, what Dad had meant when he used to say, "A home isn't just where you live. It's where your soul breathes." Mine was breathing again. And this time, I wasn't alone.